Alright, so this is lecture 5. So remember how last lecture we talked about, the physical and chemical properties of, metals. So this is basically the same thing lah. So I'm not really going to go through it. But this is one important one that I want to talk about that a lot of people get confused about. So the differences in actually group 1 elements. I'm talking about metals, for example, right? So as you can see that giant arrow, as the reactivity or as you go down the group, right, the reactivity actually becomes more reactive. Why does that happen? So the reason why is actually because as you go down the group, the atomic structures, you can see the circles, right? There are more and more circles. So what happens is that those circles actually consist of valence electrons. And those valence electrons actually get further away from the nucleus itself. So when those electrons are further away from the nucleus, they don't really have a very strong attraction. So what we call them weak attraction. So they actually can be lost easily, therefore actually making them more reactive, right? And then you can see here the first one, which is hydrogen. Typically, they have a very small atomic structure of the valence electrons. So you can see that the valence electrons are actually closer to the nucleus itself, therefore actually having a stronger bond. And the nucleus, or sorry, not the nucleus, I mean the electrons, they are not easily lost, therefore making them less reactive. So this is a reference, you can go and see for yourself. This is the physical and chemical properties of group 17, or what the fluorine, chlorine, iodine, bromine group. Okay, now we're going to talk about displacement reaction. So what is displacement reaction? So we first need to understand what is displacement reaction. It's typically when a more reactive element replaces a less reactive element. But important thing to note is that it does not completely get rid of the element. It only replaces. It is kind of like if you imagine if you have a weaker person, but all of a sudden a strong person comes in. You obviously want the stronger person to take over the person of a weaker one, right? So therefore it's kind of like this. So for down here, we can see that we have group 17 down here, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine, iodine, right? So you can see the equation down here, Cl2 and 2NaBr, which is bromine. So you can see here that chlorine is actually more reactive than bromine itself. Therefore, chlorine will switch places with bromine, right? Switch places with bromine and will become 2NaCl plus Br2. See how it does not completely get rid of the Br. Instead, it just kind of pushes it out. So this is how you do your displacement reaction. So I want another thing I want to talk about is the horizontal rows of element in the periodic table. Talking about metallic reactants. So typically on the left side down here, you have the more metallic elements down here. But as you move from left to right, you typically become elements that are less metallic down here. Because this side is usually all the metals, this side typically has a non-metals. So periods. So periods are just basically, just to use to identify elements that all have the same number of electrons in the outer configuration of atomic structures as well. So for example, group 1 would typically have 1 electron, followed by period 2, 2 electrons, period 3, 3 electrons, and then so on. And that's for lecture 5.